all for joining and messaging and all your best wishes and good luck. I woke up to so many messages today. It was really quite how should I say, encouraging. It's possibly what's and uplifting, so many of you looking forward to this show. And what is Borderlines out? It's called Borderlines because we're going to be talking about issues, topical issues, important issues, critical topics that happen, events that happen, beyond our borders. Okay? We'll go around Africa. We will go beyond Africa. We'll go to all the different continents. We're going to talk about issues that are shaping our lives and reshaping our world. Okay? We are, sorry, I've just been distracted because my guest is waiting to join on Zoom. So kindly add him so I can see him. Okay. So we're going to be talking about all of that. Now, no doubt you are all aware of the biggest issue that's happening in the world right now. And if you think because it's happening thousands of miles away, it doesn't affect you, then what can I say? You're on a long thing, as we say in Nigeria. So Borderlines is always going to be taking you beyond that space, beyond the line that separates us. Because after all, when all is said and done, we are all global citizens. So make sure you join me every Friday from today. All right? We'll be going Borderlines. So let me tell you, today's guest, my guest today is an Israeli-American writer, activist, and public speaker. He was born and raised in Jerusalem to a former Israeli general. He also a direct descendant of one of the signatories of Israel's independence, or shall I say, Israel's Declaration of Independence. I bet you don't meet any of those every day, do you? Not in Nigeria anyway. Right. My special guest today is Miko Peled. Miko is also the author of The Candidly Honest, and when I say candidly honest, I mean to the bone, raw, honest, and contemplative novel titled The General's Son, The Journey of an Israeli in Palestine. Miko, welcome. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
No, look, we love having you. Glad you said yes. We just kind of literally barged into your schedule and you said, sure, of course, I'll come and talk to you guys. So thank you, thank you. And this is, look, Nigeria, those of you joining us abroad, this is the first time I am actually speaking with Miko, right? He didn't censor any questions. He said, go ahead, ask me what you want. I'm ready to answer it, okay? And as I said to you all earlier, you're going to need a piece of paper. You're going to be learning a whole lot. So, Miko, let me say this. You're son of the late Israeli army general, and he was a war hero, Mito Ped. Your grandfather was Abraham Kettle Nelson, Cat Nelson, one of the signatories of Israel's Declaration of Independence. Let's start from the beginning. Tell me about the young Miko born in Israel into this big Zionist family protocol, and that was youth during those days. Tell me, what was Israel of your child like? I can see you're smiling.
Thank you again for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to talk to people in Nigeria and elsewhere, I suppose. Well, when you grow up, when you're young, and Israel is a very, very militarized society. So when your father is a general, and particularly that generation of generals that my father belonged to, who were heroes of the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948 and so on, then of course you're proud, and then you find out that you have I never met my grandfather, but he was a signer of the Israeli Declaration of Independence. He was a leader in the Zionist movement. I had a great uncle who was the president, and so this was family, and the people, the extended family, were people who were key to establishing the State of Israel and also key to running it the first few decades. So of course you're very proud. You feel a sense of great pride in who you are and who your family is and so on. And there was no question in my mind that, this was a special family and this was a special country, and Zionism was a special ideology that, the whole mythology of Zionism was I didn't learn it from a book. I was raised in it. I got it from my mother's milk, if you will. And that was what it was like. That's what it was like growing up, a great sense of pride and belonging and so on. and a desire to serve as well, to serve the cause as well.
Yeah, because you joined the special forces when you
Yeah,
grew
but I
up.
mean, not necessarily just militarily as a soldier. Of course, I was
Okay.
key to participate in the army as well in the beginning. I regretted it later on, but also to participate in the states. He asked me this once. I was talking to some students, and they said, "What was it like?" And I thought, the state was everything. The
Mm.
state was like and the state was Israel. It's very similar to, it was almost like fascist, really, because the state was everything. You need to work for the state. You need to help the state. You need to support the state. It was, in a way, it's very, very fascist kind of education. But that was everything. Of course, everybody wanted to be part of it and to contribute to it and so on.
When the world talks about Israel and Palestine, they often talk about them as if they're two different countries. Are they?
Well, uh, I think you know where you're going with this question. So, the subtitle of my book, the title of the book, the memoir is The General Son. The subtitle is Journey of an Israeli in Palestine, and that forces that question. That forces an answer to that question. And being existing as an Israeli.
Okay, we seem to be having technical issues. Yeah, Miko, bear with us. We're trying to fix because you're frozen. I'm no longer hearing you. Lagos, Nigeria. My guest is. Oh, Miko, you're back. Now I'm not hearing. I need to hear you. Hold on. Can we fix Miko's volume, please? Miko, try talking to me again. I stopped hearing you. Okay, you're back. Yes. Go ahead.
So what I was saying, the realization was that Israel is just a manifestation of the occupation of Palestine. It's an apartheid regime that was imposed on Palestine. And actually, I lived in Palestine, but because it is such a segregated country, those of us who have privilege, those of us who are Israelis, have nothing to do with the Palestinians. So we think we live in Israel. But really, Israel is the occupation, is the name that was given to the occupation of Palestine and the name that was given to the apartheid state or the apartheid regime that was imposed on Palestine in 1948. So it is one country.
One day, in 1947, Palestinians woke up to learn that the country they knew, the country of their birth, the indigents of the land, was going to change forever. Tell us about that.
Well, at the end of 1947, the United Nations passed a resolution calling the Partition of Palestine. And they called it the Partition of Palestine. And almost 60% of Palestine was going to be given to a small minority of immigrants who were the Jews that came and inhabited Palestine at the time. They were a minority, by far a minority to the Palestinians who lived there, Palestinian Arabs. And a smaller portion of the country was going to be left for the Palestinian Arabs to have their own state, which of course is an absurd proposition. Why would they agree to it? Who thought it was a good idea? I don't know. But what happened immediately the next day is that the Zionist forces, which we know today were nothing but glamorized terrorist organizations, immediately began a campaign of ethnic cleansing. Immediately, tens of thousands of Palestinians. By December, tens of thousands were already kicked out. Terrorist attacks by the Zionist forces were rampant all over the country. And within a year, almost 1 million Palestinians were forced out of their homes, and this new thing called the State of Israel had taken the place of Palestine, and there was the state now called the State of Israel. And what's interesting is that May 15 was the day that the state of 1948 was the day that Israel was established officially as a state.
Mm-hmm.
And from that day on, suddenly everybody started calling the place Israel, even though the Indians, the Africans, everybody that had anything to do with that country always called it Palestine, going back as far as anybody can remember. But suddenly from that day on, everybody was hit with a kind of amnesia and forgot that it was Palestine going back, and that was it. Nobody remembered that there was a Palestine, and everybody called it Israel.
Prior to Balfour's 1917 declaration, if I take on yesterday, incidentally, was 106th year anniversary of that declaration. What was Israel like, or Palestine like, as a constitution? So religion as a society, the religion, the people. What was the constitution like?
Well, there was no, prior to World War I and the British occupation of Palestine and large other parts of the Middle East, the region, or the Levant, I should say. Palestine was Palestine, but it was under under the Ottoman Empire.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't a political entity, but it was a country with a language, with a culture, with very particular, characteristics. And then the Balfour Declaration, and people in Africa can appreciate this. A racist Englishman promised a racist white Jewish person, neither of them had anything to do with Palestine. So the racist Englishman, who was a Christian Zionist, promised the land of Israel, who belonged to Palestinians, or basically Palestine, to a Jewish person. And the one white racist giving another white racist the country that belongs to people who are not Europeans. Well, like I said, Africans, this is nothing surprising there, particularly people in Africa and so on. And so that's what the Balfour Declaration was. It had nothing to do. Neither one of them had any reason to think that Palestine was theirs to give or take. But that's how the world was run.
So I want to ask you to tell us what life is like for a Palestinian in the land of their indigene. But first, before I go there, you talk about a story that your mother told you as a child, which you also actually write about in your book, The General's Son. Tell us about that story.
Okay, well, the story is that my mother was born and raised in Jerusalem. She was born in 1926. And at that time, in West Jerusalem, so the East Jerusalem and West Jerusalem are separate, but in those days they weren't. But most of the Zionist neighborhoods were built in West Jerusalem. And there were large Palestinian communities there, beautiful neighborhoods with beautiful homes. The Zionist forces came in and expelled the Palestinians completely. In other words, the ethnic cleansing of West Jerusalem was 100% complete. Not a single Palestinian was left. Not a single Palestinian was left.
This was the first Nakba, correct?
This was part of the Nakba. Yeah. This was part of the Nakba. This was in 1948. And so these homes were beautiful homes, and they remained, and they still remain. And they were given to Israelis. And my mother, she was 22 at the time. She was already a mother. Her husband was far away, fighting for the cause, so to speak. She was living in a small apartment with her mother, which was no fun. And she was offered one of these beautiful homes. We call them Arab homes to this day. Offered one of these beautiful homes that had just been, the family had just been evacuated, been kicked out. And her response at 22 was, how could I possibly take the home of another mother? How could I move into the home of a family that now have to live as refugees? And she refused, and she didn't take the home. She refused to take it, and that was. And then like you said, she told me this many, many times as a child. I never quite understood it, although there was something strange about it to me, because the national story is that we are the good guys. We don't do stuff like that.
Yeah.
And she described, and she remembers seeing this because she lived in Jerusalem. She saw the looting. She saw trucks, and people take everything out of these beautiful homes. These were well-to-do families. These communities were well-to-do communities, highly educated, with libraries and everything was stolen, and the homes were emptied and given to Israeli families. So, I was always very proud of the fact that she did that. And then later on, I started writing the book, and I talked to her about this. We spent hours and hours talking about this. That's when I understood why her story presented a problem to me, because it contradicted the national narrative.
Right.
How could we have done something like that when we're the good guys, we're the good people in the story?
Did other people, I'm assuming other families, lots of other families actually accepted those homes?
Oh, of course, they're still in them.
Till today?
Of course. Yeah, the homes are still there. These beautiful houses are still there, and people live them. Israeli families live there. Of course they do.
Let me put two quotes to you. Of course, Golda Meir, Israel's first and only female PM to date. In Sunday Times on the 15th of June, 1969, and this was also verified in the Washington Post, Golda said, and I quote, "There were no such thing as Palestinians. When was there an independent Palestine people, the Palestinian state? It was either southern Syria before the First World War, and then it was Palestine, including Jordan. It was not as though there was a Palestinian people in the Palestine considering itself as a Palestinian people, and we came and threw them out and took them away from them. They do not exist." The other quote I'm going to put to you is, quote, "A land without a people for a people without a land. Some say It was Herzl who said it, Theo Herzl. While others, and we do know, Herzl, part of the early Zionist, was others say it was just part of the early Zionist ideology. We're going to be going on break in about 2 minutes, but first, if we'd start responding to that, and then we'll continue after the break. Those two quotes.
Well, the first one I didn't hear very well because I think we were cut off, but I'll start with the second one.
Okay.
And the second one is it's they knew that there were people there, but these were people that didn't count because they were brown non-Europeans. And that's how Europeans viewed the world. If your skin color is not white and you're not European, you don't matter. So yes, from their perspective, people were invisible. So that's how they could say that it was a country without a people. But when people say it today, it shows ignorance, not only racism but also ignorance. In those days, it was pure racism. People that are not white Europeans don't matter. So the country with a lot of people.
What Golda Meir said, the first quote was, and we're about to go on, but I'll just read it out quickly. There was no such thing as Palestinians. When was an independent Palestine people with a Palestinian state? It was either southern Syria before the First World War, and then it was a Palestine, including Jordan. It was not as though there was a Palestinian people in Palestine considering itself as a Palestinian people, and we came and threw them out and took away their country. They did not exist, is what Golda Meir said.
You want me to respond to that now?
Yes. Yeah, we have. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, Golda Meir was an ignorant, racist woman and a war criminal. So it's not really surprising that she would make lies about what happened, what Palestine was or wasn't. And she said this one time that there were no Palestinian people in a speech. And my father responded in an article saying,
"Oops, we seem to be having network problems again. I think it might be from your side. Yeah, no problem from your side, Miko. Should we go on a quick break? We'll be right back. Hopefully it will fix and Miko will be able to explain that. We'll be right back. We'll go now? Now. Okay. We'll go on a quick break now because of the technical issues. We'll be right back.
Nigeria's biggest conversation. Your favorite dial. Feel comfortable with maximum security anytime you ride with HiRide. Get rewarded on points with each ride. Get cashback on card payment after every ride with lots of incentive. You also have the option of fixed fare or fare estimate. Download the app on App Store and Play Store.
HiRide, HiRide.
HiRide. HiRide. Choose your fare. Let's ride.
99.3 Nigeria Info, your number one station for talk. Let's talk.
Okay, we're back, Lagos. You're on Borderlines. My guest is author, activist, and a public speaker. He's also an Israeli American. His name is Miko Piled. You must write down the title of his book, The General's Son. It's available on Amazon. You will want to buy it, I promise you. Like, literally, you need to read it. So, Mika, before we went on break, I think we were talking about Golda Meir. Is that correct?
Yes, you mentioned a quote that she said something about no such thing as Palestinians, and I said she was an ignorant, racist war criminal, so it's not surprising that she would say...
Why'd you call her that?
Huh?
Why do you call her that?
Because that's what she was. She was ignorant. She was a racist. She was a Zionist leader. She was a major player in the establishment of the apartheid state, and she was a major player in the ethnic cleansing and the crimes against Palestinians. She held many positions in the state, and she was prime minister in the end. And she was. There's a movie about her now trying to glamorize her, but she was a terrible prime minister. And then almost exactly 50 years ago, she allowed because of her negligence, there was the war of October 1973 that could have been avoided, and because of her, it was not avoided, and it was a catastrophe. It was actually a disastrous for the Israelis, not quite as much as the recent attacks of October 7th by Palestinian fighters, but the Israeli state was caught by surprise when Syrian and Egyptian forces started a war, and it was her fault. It was her responsibility. So that's what she was, and of course she was going to say that an entire nation does not exist. And again, in terms of racist Europeans, and again, this is not news for Africans, but for European settler colonizers and racists, people of color do not exist.
Yeah. You also said your father wrote a response to her when she once said that?
A response. He had a column. He was retired from the military by then, and he had a column in the Israeli paper, and he wrote, pointing out she was ignorant, and how could she say something like this? Because when she held all these positions throughout her career, and she met with officials, and she was the emissary to the United Nations, and he said, people talk about the Palestinian refugees all the time, and they call them the Palestinian refugees. So could it be that she'd never heard of them? Could it really be that she's that ignorant and out of touch that she had never heard of the Palestinians? Kind of making mocking her for that statement. But it's not surprising. These were ignorant, racist criminals. So that's how they talked.
Lagos, you can watch us live on YouTube, Nigeria Info 99.3, and on Facebook. Twitter, Nigeria Info FM, Instagram, Nigeria Info FM Lagos. Our website is nigeriainfo.fm. I will be picking up your calls because I can see some of you are calling. You want to ask me a question, but come on. I've got to talk to him first. He's my guest. Come on, people. Okay, but when you're going to call, the number 0700 993 993 993 and the female-only line is 0146571190. WhatsApp 0809-597-5805. You can start sending your message on WhatsApp now. You that's calling, stop calling. Miko, what's the difference between Zionism and Jewish people? Most people don't know the difference. What is the difference, or is there a difference? Talk us through that.
Well, Judaism is a religion. Zionism is a racist settler colonial ideology that produced a racist state called the State of Israel. So the two things could not be more different. The early Zionists were secular people. They created this ideology that was based on lies. that said that the Jewish people are not a religion, but a nation, that said that the Bible is not a book of faith, but a history book. And they said that Palestine belongs to Jewish people. So they built this mythology, this ideology on three basic lies. Jewish people have nothing in common as a nation. The only thing that's in common for Jewish people is their faith. That's why you can have Jews who are dark-skinned and Jews who are Europeans, and you can have Jews who speak all the different languages and eat different foods. They don't have a common culture. They don't have a common language. They necessarily don't have any of the commonalities of a nation. But they are a religion. They're a faith. And to accuse Jewish people of being Zionists is anti-Semitic, because Zionism is a racist, violent, settler colonial ideology that produced an apartheid state. And again, Africans know very well about settler colonialism and apartheid. And so there couldn't be any bigger difference between Zionism and Judaism. The distance between these two could not be bigger, could not be more pronounced. And what the Zionists did, because they realized this, is from the very beginning, they started accusing Jews and non-Jews who rejected Zionism, and in the early days, almost all Jews rejected Zionism, as being somehow, anti-Semitic or having some kind of fault in their own identity if they are Jews who rejected Zionism and so on. So they've been on this campaign for a very long time, trying to conflate these two. But I can see how it can be confusing, but the two could not be more different.
Often we hear the right to return. What does that mean? So is that just something for Zionists, or does everybody who believes in Israel or the Jewish people believe that the right to return? What does it mean? And does it apply to the Palestinians as well?
The right of return only applies to the Palestinians, because Palestinians were displaced starting in 1947, 48, and to this day, Palestinians are being constantly displaced from their homes and from their land. In 1948, throughout that period, when Israel was established, almost 1 million Palestinians were forcibly displaced from their land and from their home. And today we have almost 6 million Palestinian refugees in camps, never mind all the refugees that live in other countries that are not in camps. And so the right of return is enshrined in international law. It's enshrined in the United Nations resolutions. It's enshrined in just, basic morality. And so the right of return for Palestinians is a right that, and one of the things that needs to happen, I believe, is that as quickly as possible, mechanisms need to be put in place to allow for this this right to materialize, and for the refugees to be allowed and the Palestinians to be allowed to return to their homes and land. Now, I'll say one more thing. There's an excellent book called Palestinian Refugees in International Law. And it was co-written by Francesca Albanese, who is now the UN rapporteur for the occupied territories in Palestine. And in this book, she shows very clearly that not only is the right of return not diminishing with time, it is becoming stronger and stronger. Their case is stronger with time. And she also outlines everything that the Zionists stole when they took Palestine. We're talking about cities, entire cities, public domains, public spaces, parks, hospitals, schools, cars, produce from the fields, people's money. There was money in the banks. I mean, there was an entire population there, an entire country there, and they stole it all. And so it's a very important document, and I strongly recommend people look into it if they have any doubt about the Palestinians' right to return.
Often certainly in Nigeria and, across the world, when people talk about the conflict, they talk about it in the context of a religious conflict. Is it a religious conflict, or is it a land conflict? Is it about land grabbing, or is it about one religion being superior to the other?
There's nothing to do with religion. The Zionists are secular people. There's nothing to do with religion.
They are. Can you just say that slowly? I just want my listeners to hear you. Zionists are what?
Zionism is a secular ideology, and Zionists were secular people. They did not want to have anything to do with religion, not even their own religion. They turned away from it completely. And Palestinians have a multitude of religions. Some are, I mean, historically, some are, the majority are Muslims, but some are Christians, and some are different types of Christians, different denominations of Christians. And initially, they're also Zionists. They're also, excuse me, they're also Palestinian Jews who lived in Palestine, a minority, but they're Palestinian Jews.
Mm-hmm.
So it can't be a religious issue because it's not about religion. It's about an ideology, like I said earlier, of racism and settler colonialism that has taken over Palestine and established an apartheid state. It has absolutely nothing to do with religious differences.
You once talked about, I think the quote, if I remember rightly, you said, Israel is not espousing Jewish values. Tell us about Jewish values. Again, these are some of the things that people don't know about because they hear from Netanyahu. They see the conflict. But because they've got the religion mixed up with the people, with the Zionists, what are Jewish values?
Well, the two things that stand out are, the two of the Ten Commandments, we would say, do not murder and do not steal.
Mm-hmm.
And Zionists have been murdering and stealing from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, right there, that's really all we have to say. I mean, it's very easy to answer that. The state of Israel, which I believe does not represent Jews, but calls itself a Jewish state, self-proclaimed Jewish state, is engaged in mass, in what I believe is genocidal policies, and in massive theft of land. And so, Judaism is a religion that has, particular set of laws, and Israel has nothing to do with any of those laws.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, in terms of Orthodox Jew, if you look at the very Orthodox, the most ultra-Orthodox religious Jews have always rejected Zionism, and today reject Israel, from the very beginning, because it's a secular state, it's a secular ideology. It's, like I said again, 10 times probably already, it's racist and violent. It's engaged in stealing and murder. And look at what's been going on the last few weeks in Gaza. There's a mass murder of innocent civilians.
Yes, we're going to be talking about that. Let me take you back to your father. This is a quote from you. You said, "My dad was the strongest, loudest, rudest of all the young generals who was pushing for war." I think in 1967. Yet,
yes,
by the time of your father's death, he became a strong and vocal campaigner of pro-Palestinian freedom and independence and self-determination. What led to his change of mind?
He didn't change his mind.
Okay.
He believed that after the 1967 war, which was really a massive assault by Israel against its neighbors, an unprovoked, unjustifiable assault, massive assault by the Israeli army against its neighbors, he believed that Israel established itself and that now it can afford to make peace. And the idea of peace that he prescribed to,
go ahead. Keep going.
It's an idea that's basically a Zionist idea, which says that that Israel should remain on the vast majority of Palestine, and a small portion of Palestine that is determined by Israel would be allocated for the Palestinians for some kind of a limited statehood. Well, he said this immediately after the war, still in uniform. And everybody looked around at him and said, "Well, you're out of your mind. We just got land. We got all our land. Why would we give anybody self-determination that wasn't Jewish?" They didn't see the logic in what he was saying.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Look, don't do this, then we are going to, the whole idea of a Jewish state and on and on and on, it's not going to happen because there will be an Arab majority, a Palestinian majority, and we will be clearly unable to manage it." And he was right, of course. But the problem is that no compromises in Zionism. Zionism is a zero-sum game. The Zionists believe that that Palestine is the land of Israel and therefore belongs to the Jewish people. So it doesn't belong to the state of Israel and to Israeli citizens. It belongs to the Jewish people all around the world. And Palestinians are mere invaders that need to be kicked out. So obviously it didn't work, and he dedicated his life to helping Palestinians as much as he could within that framework. But again, Zionism, you have to either reject, like any form of racism, you either reject or accept it. You can't expect it to compromise. There's no compromise in racism. You're either a racist or you're not a racist. There's no gray area. and Zionism is a racist ideology. So the whole idea of a two-state, that's why the whole idea of a two-state solution could never materialize. It was bound to fail from the very beginning.
We're going to be talking about that because I know you have specific idea on what you think the solution is, right? This is radio. Yes. We're going on a break in about 30 seconds. You can watch us live on YouTube and on Facebook. They'll message me. Watch us live on YouTube and on Facebook. And you can send your messages ahead before I start your messages on 0809 597 5805. Miko Peled is an author. He's an activist. In fact, he's a peace activist. Yes, you might not think so as you're hearing him now. Actually, that's what he's about. Happy snooze.
Yeah, I beg to differ. The big tournament is back. Secondary school students in Lagos will file out in the I Beg to Differ School Debate Tournament to test who deserves the crown. Head to head.
You also mentioned that traditional rulers are symbols near to God power. This is not correct.
Some Muslims have respect for the traditional rulers. This is even more of a threat.
Point for point.
Terrorism, which is a serious issue in academics, will only escalate rapidly.
How can erratic rainfalls, drought, and flooding help agriculture?
Greatest of rebuttals.
Every single speech made by politicians are being manipulated by the media.
Well, my report that all that one helps.
And the smoothest of closings. I Beg to Differ School Debate Tournament on Nigeria Info FM Lagos. Are you ready?
Oh, it was fun.
It was crazy.
author. He's an activist. Yeah, you might not think so, but he's actually a peace activist. You have to keep listening.
99.3 Nigeria.
Okay? He's still with me. He's joining me, I think, from San Diego. Miko, are you there? Oops. I can't see him on Zoom right now. Hopefully he's gonna join us. Have you been listening, Lagos? Are you sending me your messages? Send your questions in advance because it will be faster for me to take the questions from WhatsApp, to be honest with you. 0809 597 5805. If you are not watching, you should be. I'm even wearing red lipstick. YouTube, Nigeria Info 99.3, and Facebook. On Twitter, we're Nigeria Info FM. Instagram, Nigeria Info FM Lagos. Have we got the news right now? Okay, we'll be back after these news headlines. Miko Pellet is author of The General's Son. Miko, Nelson Mandela in 1997, and I know you've talked about we know too that freedom is incomplete without the freedom of Palestinians. He said this after his visit to his Middle East tour when he went to Israel and Palestine. He also announced that the support of the two-state solution. Now, he went on to say, choose peace rather than confrontation, except in cases where we cannot proceed, or we cannot move forward. Then if the only alternative is violence, we will use violence. Is that where we are today?
Well,
it's a tough one.
I wouldn't characterize what Palestinians are doing right now as violence. I think the violence that's being perpetrated is perpetrated, by far, but mostly by Israel. And from time to time, Palestinians engage in active armed resistance, but it's those instances are quite rare compared to the rest of the Palestinian resistance, which is unarmed. And considering if we're going to talk about enormous amounts of violence, then the conversation should be about Israel, not about the Palestinian use of armed resistance from time to time. So, and Nelson Mandela, that was his policy. We know that the ANC had a military wing that, according to the West, was engaged in terrorism. According to others, was engaged in legitimate freedom. And so I take issue with the fact that he and not only him, but the international community adopted this idea of a two-state solution, whereas in fact the entire Zionist project, the state of Israel in its whole, was an apartheid state and should have been rejected completely. He lived within constraints that he had to negotiate. But just like all of South Africa was apartheid, and it's not like you could have said, well, let's put a little bit of apartheid and give a little bit of freedom to a small group of African Black South Africans, and then the rest of it can remain. That's really what the state solution is. It's to say, we'll splice stuff apart, allow Palestinians some rights in that little part, and the rest of it, really to solution. He had something similar offers of compromise, before he was released and before apartheid collapsed completely. That's really where we are today. We're at a place where Palestinians on October the 7th engaged in acts of resistance out of this. The Palestinian fighters came out of the poorest, most depressed, most oppressed place on earth almost, and managed to completely paralyze the state of Israel. I mean, completely paralyze the state of Israel for weeks. And it demonstrated that Israel does not have the ability to defend its own citizens. And it demonstrated the fact that the Israeli military is nothing but a paper tiger. So now they're taking out revenge by murdering thousands and thousands of innocent people by bombing them. Well, that's not self-defense.
We're going to talk about that. Yeah,
and that's not defending, and that's not guaranteeing or securing the safety of Israelis. Israelis are still confused, feeling unsafe anywhere in the country, and the state is not functioning. The entire state of Israel is not functioning, has not been functioning since October the 7th. And again, all of this was caused by a small group of fighters who came out of Gaza Strip, for not loud, one of the most oppressed on earth today. So that's really where we are today.
I'm glad you mentioned October 7th, and you mentioned the loss and the amount of people that are being killed now since October 7th in Gaza, in the occupied West Bank, Palestinians. But prior to that, of course, on October 7th, Hamas attacked Israel and reportedly killed 1,400 Israelis and took around 250 hostage. Before I go deep into that, I want to take you back to your loss, the loss you experienced in 1997 when your niece was killed by a bomb, with an Hamas bomb, a bomb set by Hamas. How did that affect you, your mindset, and the exceptionality of your sister, whose daughter was actually killed, and the things that are, the steps and the response and the narrative that her and her husband said to the to Israeli government officials who were kind of asking her for a statement?
Well, I mean, words really can't do justice to the kind of catastrophe when a 13-year-old girl that and love is suddenly taken away and in such a violent. whether the Palestinians or the Hamas or any other things in Israel. The Palestinians and Palestinian brigade in such a violence should give us pause for a moment. We need to pause and talk about that. Three young Palestinians, three young people come out and take away their own lives and take the lives of others around them. This is we've grown accustomed to talk about these things and then move on. And I'm saying no, we're not going to move on. We need to look at the details, and we need to look closely at what happened there and what it represents. And what my sister said, because she was asked about retaliation and so on. She said, first of all, no real mother would want to see this happen to another mother. We'll talk to about people as a response to the death of a child. And then she and her husband pointed at the Israeli government, the Prime Minister Netanyahu, the same war criminal who's president today. And they said the Israeli government is responsible for our daughter's death, just as it is responsible for the death of countless Palestinians, because when you maintain a brutal regime against another people and kill them and you take away their children and you arrest and detain their family members and on, this is what's going to happen. What do we expect? And that's precisely what happened on October 7th. What do we expect? The Palestinians will not, the oppressed people, the bruised people are being brutalized. It's not just oppressed. The word oppressed doesn't even begin to, I think, describe the brutality of what Palestinians are. And they will not rise from time to arms is absurd. This won't happen. That was her statement, and that was her stance at the time, and so on. And I believe it's the right to see this. We have to put this in context. As painful and as horrible as it is, it cannot be taken away from the political context of what Israel represents and what Israel is doing, and what all of us as Israel. We served in the military. We enjoyed the fruits of the war. We lived as privileged people across the street sometimes from people who had no water, no access to water, no freedom, never mind access to the basic most freedoms, the basic most rights that we take that Israelis took for granted. Yes, of course, it's very, very painful, and would have hoped that if people had paid attention then, all these years ago, all the deaths that have been taking place since then would not have happened. But that's what took place. The world still continues to support Israel and allow Israel to continue to brutalize Palestinians, and here we are today, and it's happening as we speak.
Who is Hamas? Who are they? Who is Group Hamas? We know they're democratically elected. I believe they're political party. They were elected in Gaza. But who is the group Hamas? Founded by Mohammed Yazin. Who are they?
Ahmed Yassin. Yes, well, Hamas was a resistance organization. It's a resistance movement that has a political wing and a military wing, which is like all resistance organizations have. They were established in 1987, 88 during the first Palestinian uprising, what's known as the First Intifada. And they've been operating ever since. And the problem has never been Palestinian resistance. The problem has been the brutalizing and oppression of Palestinians by Israel, because obviously that produces resistance. So blaming Hamas or blaming any Palestinian resistance for doing what they're supposed to do, which is resist and fight for the freedom of people, is nonsense. If you want to find fault, let's find fault in the occupier, in the aggressor. And that they've been ever since. And then from 2006, 2007, they have been cut off, and they have been controlling, governing to the best of their abilities under very difficult conditions. The Gaza Strip, where we almost have 2.5 million people who are imprisoned basically in this small area. That's what Hamas is.
That was going to be my next question. Why is the Gaza Strip so densely populated? I understand there are 97% or 79% of those who live in Gaza are refugees.
So the Gaza Strip was established in around the late 1949, 1950. It was as a strip. I mean, it has no geographical boundaries or natural boundaries. It was somebody sat with a piece of paper and created it. And the city of Gaza is, of course, the largest city there, an ancient historic city that has an incredible history. And they needed a place in which to herd the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians that were thrown out of their homes, particularly in the southern part of Palestine. And so Gaza was known for its beauty, known for its culture. It was known for its churches and mosques. It was known for universities and so on. It was known for its wonderful citrus and the smell of citrus in summer, and so forth. The citrus blossom. It's a fishing of great, known for seafood and so on. And suddenly it became a place of poverty and overcrowdedness and resistance, among other things. And this was because of Israel. Israel took this place that was really quite paradise and turned it into a humanitarian catastrophe way back then. Humanitarian catastrophe already way back then. This is not new. And that's why it's crowded. I mean, these refugees have nowhere to go. And the vast majority of the population in Gaza, over 55% are children. They're under the age of 18. You know, it's basically a population of children who are refugees and are not permitted to go back to their homes. Their homes, their lands, their rights, their water are on the other side of the fence. But they've been enclosed in this prison since 2007, 2006, 2007. And Israel has been bombing and killing and committing horrific acts of brutality and massacres against the people of Gaza. As soon as the Gaza Strip was established, they would go in there with commando units and massacre civilians. And the only thing that's different, and in the beginning there was no Hamas in those days. There, nothing to do with Hamas. In the beginning, they said they were terrorists, and they said they were infiltrators. They kept giving names to this devil that exists in Gaza and justifies murdering civilians. And the difference is that today, Israel has access to weapons that kill thousands, whereas maybe in the beginning they only killed dozens or hundreds. Now they're killing thousands at a time in a matter of days. And so the brutality is far, far worse. But Gaza has been the target of Israeli brutality and savagery from the very beginning.
I remember it's funny you say that, because I remember growing up and watching this on TV in the UK, and I would see big Israeli tanks facing this young Gazan boys, mostly boys, and all they did was stones at tanks. And it was something that always stuck with me, and I couldn't comprehend how and yeah. So it's interesting that you mentioned that. I have a question. This is from Tokwe from Ajegunle. Tokwe said, my question to Miko is that was he or even his family or his family members at any time was he or even his family members at any point come under fire from Israeli government because of their own conviction on this conflict? I believe you said he's an Israeli. That's good from Ajegunle. That's one question. I've got questions coming in. And because we don't have much time, I'm going to try and throw as many to you as possible. Who is this from? This is from Mrs. Oboli, who said, good afternoon, Sister Gay, to the guest in the studio, or to your guest you're interviewing on the groundbreaking episode. Question to your guest is what's your stand about the war now? Okay. That's number 2, and then I have.
Let's do these two, and then you can add.
Okay,
more. So
go ahead.
The answer to the first one is very simple. No, we have not really suffered. The apartheid state is one that gives full privileges to the Israeli Jews, and part of those privileges are the right to speak. And so we've never been. Now things are different. Now people are being suspended from their work, from their jobs. People are being silenced, and there's no tolerance and there's no resistance, no protest, no dissent at all is being permitted. So the atmosphere among Israelis is very, very severe. But generally speaking, no. The answer to that is no. The war that what we're seeing today, we're seeing one more, a battle in a war that Israel has waged against the Palestinian people 75 years ago. And from time to time, it flares up, and we see it. We see expressions of it that are more pronounced, like what we see today. But this is a war that Israel has waged against Palestinians 75 years ago, and it's never let up. It's never stopped. The killing and the brutality of Palestinians is not only expressed with tanks, it's expressed with the day-to-day torture of people when they're being arrested, when they're being killed, when their homes are being demolished, when they have no rights, when they have no access to water, whereas across the street from them, Israeli Jews living in settlements have all the water they could possibly want, and on and on and on, limits on where they can go, where they can work. And the basic fear, knowing Palestinians have nowhere place on earth where they can be safe. In other words, no one is looking out for Palestinians. Nobody's speaking out for Palestinians, and Palestinians are not safe. Absolutely not safe. I wake up every morning wondering if the children of my Palestinian brothers and sisters have not been orphaned or have not been arrested and killed themselves. And that's regardless of where they live throughout all of Palestine, all of historic Palestine, much of it people like to call Israel. I reject that name, but So the this we're seeing now is an flare up of the war that's been going on for a very long time.
I have a question from Abe, which I think you might be able to answer before we go on break in 2.5 minutes. Abe says, Rachel, can you please ask your guest if today's Palestine is the Philistine of the Bible, and saying Israel became a nation in 48 negates the biblical claim of Israel owning the land centuries before Jesus born, and when we are made to believe, or what we're made to believe, of becoming a nation.
So there's no connection whatsoever between Israel today and the ancient Hebrews.
Right.
I don't know.
Please,
I don't know. A
Mike,
person,
Miko, sorry, please say that slowly again. Slowly, please.
Okay, there's absolutely no connection between Israel today, the ancient Hebrews, or the ancient Israelites that we read about in the Old Testament. I don't know a single Jewish person on earth, not only ones that live in occupied Palestine, but any other Jewish people anywhere that can trace their roots back to the ancient Hebrews. This was a tribe that lived, in that part of the world 3,000 years ago. The Bible obviously glorifies it, but the Bible is not a book of history, it's a book of faith. So we shouldn't take it, at its words historically. And if we look, there's an excellent book that I recommend called Palestine, A 4,000-Year History by a Palestinian historian, Nur Masalha, who teaches at the University of London. And he demonstrates that the name Palestine or Palestine has been used to describe that land, that country, going back 4,000 years. If you look at the Egyptians and the Babylonians and the Assyrians and on and on and on, that land has been consistently known as Palestine, as Palestine. And nowhere is it called Israel anywhere else, but of course by the people who claim it. And the claim for the claim that the Jews have a right to Palestine or to the land of Israel is also not true. Again, if we follow the logic of follow Jewish theology, Jewish people were granted the right to live in the Holy Land as long as they obeyed the laws of the laws that were given to them, the laws of the Jewish faith. When they did not, they were expelled, and they have not been granted permission to return. And Jewish sovereignty in the Holy Land is prohibited to Jews by Jewish law. I'll say this again. According to Jewish law, Jewish people are prohibited from sovereignty in the Holy Land. So these things are completely
right. I'll be right back. We've got to go on break. I'll be right back. I didn't want to interrupt you. Right back. Just a 3.5-minute break.
Are you a designer? Do you love football?
Welcome back to Borderlines. Yes, the advert went on a bit longer than expected. I've got questions. I think I read a question to you earlier. There seemed to be a lot of confusion about the Bible and and Israel and Palestine, etc. Now, I have a question here, and I'm gonna read it out very slowly. Hello, I'm Raymond, and today I am utterly disappointed in Irate Bakare-Yusuf and Nigeria Info altogether, and the guest for all the misinformation you have spread concerning Israel-Palestine conflict. I thought I'd leave you, the experts, to respond to that.
If you can point out the misinformation, I can respond. But when people say that there's no misinformation, not one iota of information here.
Yeah.
They can be as disappointed as they want. But look, this is a serious problem that I see. I know it exists in Nigeria, and I know that it exists in many parts of Africa, where the Zionist narrative, the Israeli narrative, has taken over in Africa, that has suffered so greatly from settler colonialism and apartheid, and has fought settler colonialism as.
Oh, the network. Gosh, the network. Oops. Yeah, let me answer a call because we seem to be having a problem. The line has frozen. Hello? Hello? Okay, it's cut off. It seems to be, if you call now, I could take a message because the line is frozen. Or at least should I say, the connection seems to have frozen. Okay, I'm coming to your calls now. Hello? Oops, no. It's a good time to call. Hello? Hello?
Hello, good evening.
Good evening. What's your name and where you calling from?
Thank you. My name is Michael. I'm calling from Okota.
Go ahead, Michael. What's your question? Okay, hold on. Hold on 1 second. Hold on. Miko, you back? I think I can see you. Hold on. Miko is back. I want him to be able to hear you. Sorry, I had to pick up calls whilst the network was, whilst the Zoom froze.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Ask your question, please.
Actually now?
Yes.
Well, okay, yeah. My question goes to your guest. He is trying to push a narrative that let the world see how wicked the Israeli has been to the Palestine. He has not tried to be honest to this fact on ground.
Okay.
That Hamas is a bloody side of the whole thing. They are killing Israel.
Okay.
And
I can only do 30 seconds because I don't have much time. I'll pass that to him. Okay? Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, that was another call. I missed his name earlier. He said you are trying to do a disservice to Israel, that Hamas is killing Israel. You were talking earlier on before the line broke. Go ahead.
I said it is sad and unfortunate that people in Africa who suffered from settler colonialism, racism, and apartheid stand up for Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And I guarantee you that these two questions were asked by people who are ignorant or are paid by the different agencies that work for Israel to call in shows like this and spew this nonsense. If Hamas is killing Israel, how is it that Israel has been bombing and butchering thousands and thousands of Palestinians over the last few weeks? How can anybody in their right mind say that Hamas is killing Israel? It's absolute nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. Like accusing Black Africans of being guilty of the settler colonialism or being guilty of apartheid. It's an absolute campaign of misinformation. And again, I'll say it again. It is absolutely tragic that in Africa we hear voices, and in Africa Israel is allowed to have over 40 diplomatic missions. Who trained Mobutu in the Congo? Who trained Idi Amin? Who supported apartheid in South Africa? And on and on and on. How could anybody in Africa allow the state of Israel have any kind of support in the African continent, a country that suffers and continue to suffer from Israeli brutality, even though it's not directly military? And so these people are either paid or they're ignorant. It's complete nonsense.
Thank you. because we don't have time, I need to talk to you about the U.S. Why is the U.S. so invested? Why is the rest of the world not even demanding, never mind asking, demanding for a ceasefire? We have over 9,000 Gazans killed. One child is killed every 10 minutes by an Israeli bomb since Netanyahu declared war. Why is the Western world so complicit, if I may use that word?
It's not only the Western world. Africa has Israel has 44 diplomatic missions in Africa. Why are they not being kicked out?
Yeah.
BRICS, Brazil, Russia, China, South Africa, granted, is a little bit different within that alliance. Why are they not kicking out the Israeli ambassadors? Why do they still have diplomatic missions in Tel Aviv? Why is the entire world still supporting and working and doing business with Israel? There should be sanctions, severe sanctions against this brutal state. And what we're seeing now, an expression, the latest expression, it's not the first and it's not the only expression. It is the latest expression of brutality and savagery by Israel. And countries are buying weapons from Israel. Countries are doing business with Israel. Why? Why is Israel allowed to have even a single diplomatic mission in Africa? Why is Israel being considered to be an observer in the African Union? Have everybody lost their minds? Does everybody have some kind of amnesia? Don't they remember how the kind of regimes and the kind of brutality and the pillaging that Israel participated in of stealing resources from Africa? You know, it's absolutely absurd. So it's not only the West. Yes, the West support, the West complicity is much more pronounced. But any country that allows itself to have its diplomatic mission in Tel Aviv or allows an Israeli mission in its own capital is complicit. Is complicit in the murder of innocent children in Palestine on a regular basis. That is the question. It's no longer an issue of the West. It's an issue that touches on every single, all of these countries around the world that are working, except for a handful, Cuba, Colombia, and a few other countries that are standing and have kicked the ambassadors from their capitals.
Yeah, we've had the Bolivian pull their ambassador. We've had, I think Jordan has pulled their ambassador and one or two others. We've still got a little bit of time. I need to talk about the Middle East, the Abraham Convention or the Abraham Accord. Why is the Middle East not leading? Even, the ceasefire, the demand for ceasefire. Why is the Middle East not leading?
I think you're talking about the Arab world. And let me tell you one thing about the Arab countries, okay? The Arab leaders today have been faced with some very grim choices. The countries that did not work with the U.S., did not work with Israel, are Iraq, Syria, Libya, Yemen. And what happened to them? I'll say it again. The countries that stood and resisted working with Israel and America have destroyed Libya, Syria, Iraq, Yemen. So if you're an Arab leader today, you have a choice. You either resist Israel and the United States and the West and have your country destroyed and your people murdered, or you collaborate with them and maintain your country's existence.
Yeah,
this is a very grim choice, and so it's very easy to blame the Arab countries. The people I was here in Jordan. There was a protest. There's several protests today, of course, of solidarity with the Palestinians. So there is solidarity in terms of protest, in terms of the people speaking up. But as leaders of these countries, they face a very, very grim reality where they have to make this very difficult choice. And in a way, they're making the responsible choice, even though it's bad for Palestinians. They're making a choice to maintain their country and maintain their people alive. This is really what the West has created in the Arab world.
The lines are going on fire. Okay, I don't know whether to read the message. I knew you'd say that. I'm going to pick up one call, and when I come to you, 30 seconds, please give your question in 30 seconds. Lots of lines on fire. Hello?
20 seconds.
20 seconds. Hello?
Hello?
Yes. What's your name and where you're calling from?
My name is Larry. I'm calling from Abuja.
Okay, go ahead. Give us your question in 20 seconds, please.
Our brother is saying that everybody that is talking from Africa, the majority of all are talking nonsense. No problem. But I want to ask him, all the people that they are killing in Nigeria, What have his people said concerning them?
What is the what?
A lot of people are murdered in this country. Some people are being pressed down.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are being
Yeah, but what is the, hold on. Hello.
I couldn't hear what you.
Don't worry.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening. What's your name and where are you calling from?
My name is Phil. I'm calling from Lagos Island.
Go ahead. 20 seconds. Your question, please.
Okay, I want to ask, why is it that when in Europe, when the Russians were attacking the Ukrainians and there was a lot of solidarity with Ukraine, and Russia was giving a lot of sanctions, but for Palestine, if you watch sporting activities or solidarity protests anywhere in the world, they ask them to bring the Palestinian flags down.
Thank you very much. Fine. Thank you. I got your message. Thank you. Your question. Hello?
Yeah, hello. You ready?
Yes, good afternoon.
Yeah, afternoon. Baba J on the line.
Baba J, go ahead. You have 20 seconds, please.
Quickly, I, for one, I don't like killing, especially washing children brutally murdered. And the question I'm going to ask, this present war, I was made to understand Hamas was the one that started the breaking and they killed 1,400 Israelis. So Israelis said, okay, let's declare war. In as much you kill our children, our women, and you kidnap most of us, we are going to bring Gaza down. I want to ask the best, is it true Hamas started the war? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Let me answer that.
Go ahead.
Let's talk about.
Go ahead.
Let's talk about.
Go ahead.
So this is what's coming out. Witnesses who saw this, who were there when the Palestinians Gaza came in. They're claiming that they killed 1,000 or I don't know how many Israelis. It seems that a great many, if not most, a great many, if not most, of the Israelis that were killed by Israeli fire, and they're witnesses, Israeli witnesses who were hostages, who spoke up and were pressed, saying the Israeli fire killed many, and we don't know how many yet because everything is still up in the air. But we know that many of the Israelis, and I would venture to guess that it's the vast majority of the Israelis that were killed by Israeli fire. The Palestinians who came in had a very particular objective, a very particular mission, and that is to take hostages so that they can negotiate the release of thousands of political prisoners that Israel is holding, political Palestinian prisoners it's holding.
Let me interrupt you. How many Palestinians are held in Israel prison right now, roughly?
The number fluctuates between 6,000 and 7,000 at the moment. Some of them are children, some of them are women, but that is the range. Between 6,000 and 7,000 Palestinian prisoners are held. The vast majority, of course, are political. They're all political prisoners, actually. And so Hamas could not possibly have started a war. Hamas is a resistance organization. Resistance organizations don't start a war. Resistance organizations respond to a war against their people, respond to oppression of their people. The war began 75 years ago when the state of Israel declared war on the Palestinian people. And from time to time, now Palestinians have never had an army. Palestinians have never had a military. Palestinians have never had a tank or warplane, ever in the history. So today, when a small group of resistance fighters comes out in an attempt to take hostages and have managed to completely paralyze the entire state of Israel, the problem is not the resistance fighters, who, by the way, came to take hostages. So the accusations of them murdering or killing so many civilians makes absolutely no sense. Now, again, we don't know for sure, except that we heard Israelis who were there, who were hostages that were released, that great numbers of Israelis were killed by Israeli fire. And this is part of an Israeli. It makes sense because this has been Israeli policy going back, for a very long time. They tried to release hostages using military force and kill the hostages as well, many of the hostages. So they've done this before, and we know this is a pattern. So it's not outrageous. So the Palestinians we don't know how many were killed by Palestinian fire, but we know for sure that many were killed by Israeli fire. And there's the accusation that somehow the resistance began the war is absurd. This is not a war. This is a flare of a war that's been going on for a very long time. And Israel was humiliated. Israel, who thinks it has some kind of a great military force, was humiliated by a small group of fighters who came from one of the poorest, most oppressed places on earth. And so they were humiliated, and now they're taking out their revenge. What we're seeing in Gaza is not a strategic military operation. We are seeing bloody acts of savagery and revenge. That's all this is. The Palestinian fighters are continuing to fight. The Israeli military is still being killed by the Palestinian military during the battles taking place in Gaza. So the fact that they're killing thousands of civilians is not impacting the ability of the Palestinian fighters to continue to fight. They're still fighting right now. The murder of civilians is not a strategy to defend anyone. It's a act of brutal revenge. That's it. By humiliated military force, which is the state of Israel.
Now, what is peace? You've always been a peace advocate. You're an advocate for one state solution. But given what we are seeing today, given the death on both sides, but mostly on the side of the Palestinians, the death of children, women, cancer patients who are not able to get treatment, pregnant women, doctors who are standing in duty and watching their children be rolled in, and all the chaos, atrocities and pain that we see. And we have the likes of Blinken, we have Biden, we have Keir Starmer in the UK, the Labour Party leader, and we have Rishi Sunak and so many others. Yesterday, I watched a video. I think her name is Margaret Phillips, who is a right-wing conservative broadcaster in England. Several of these people are saying this is not the time to ask for ceasefire. Miko, tell me, if this is not the time to ask for a ceasefire, when is? What number? What number? How many more have to die before we demand, never mind ask, for a ceasefire?
Well, because it's not their children being killed, they don't care about the ceasefire. That's basically what this is. These are Palestinian children, Palestinian people being killed, and they don't care about that because these are the Palestinians, and Palestinian life has no value. Just like African life has no value in the eyes of the same people that you mentioned. These names of the people you mentioned, these were Africans being murdered or Palestinians being murdered. They have no life. Their life means nothing. And so if somebody's killing them, and especially if it's the state of Israel, which is, the darling of the imperialist settler colonial states, then who cares? That's why this is happening. Now, if you want to see peace, then peace is possible.
How?
Between Israelis and Palestinians. Between Israelis and Palestinians.
How?
But not under an apartheid state. The apartheid state has to be dismantled, like in South Africa. Once apartheid is dismantled and a free, democratic Palestine takes its place over all of historic Palestine, then we can see Israelis and Palestinians living in peace, because the idea is this. This is what people don't understand. Being pro-Israel means Palestinians have to die. Being pro-Palestinian means giving the ability to Israelis and Palestinians live in peace as equals. Because Israeli ideology and Israeli policy is to live at the expense of, to get rid of the Palestinians and live at the expense of Palestinians. When Palestinians call for peace, when Palestinians call for justice, it's the end of the regime of apartheid. It's to bring an end to the racism and violence and to allow both Israelis and Palestinians to live in peace. So that's the difference here. If we care for peace, we have to dismantle the state of Israel, dismantle the apartheid regime, and allow for a real democratic state to take its place. That's how we achieve peace for Israelis and Palestinians. And I'll say this again. Justice for Palestine means peace for Israelis and Palestinians. Supporting Israel means killing and murder and racism that we've seen over the last 75 years.
Wow. Now, I'm going to ask you something, because I've had a lot of messages. We just don't have time to read it out. Some have called you. Some have sent in messages saying you're a terrorist sympathizer. Some have said you're misrepresenting history. Others have said you're unpatriotic. Miko, are you a patriot of Israel?
Of course not. Nobody in their right mind could be a patriot of an apartheid, racist, violent state. Of course not. I reject Israel, and I think the state of Israel is the problem. Of course, I'm not an Israeli patriot. Why would I be?
Are you
Israel is an apartheid state. It's like asking Joe Slovo, who was part of the ANC, a major leader, was a white Jewish man, or Ruth First, or Albie Sachs, who were major figures in the ANC and were white and Jewish. Are they patriotic apartheid citizens? Of course they're not. Of course they, because they were white, does that mean they have to be patriots of apartheid? No, they fought along Nelson Mandela and others to free South Africa from apartheid. So it's this, to ask me if I'm an Israeli patriot is a complete misunderstanding of what I stand for and what the state of Israel is. The state of Israel is a violent, racist entity. That is precisely what we're trying to replace with a free, democratic Palestine. Because it's called Israel, it's hard for people to reject it because it's kind of biblical, But Israel is apartheid. Israel is synonymous with apartheid. Israel is synonymous with violence. Israel is synonymous with settler colonialism. It has to go. And I'll say this again. If we support the Palestinian cause, we can have peace for Israelis and Palestinians. If we support Israel, we are supporting violence and brutality against Palestinians.
Thank you so much. I don't know how long have we got left. Right. I don't know how long. Okay, I've got 5 minutes left. Okay. Let me try and grab I'm going to try and pick up a call, and I'm sure there will be a question there. I'm calling to you right now. Hello.
Hello, good evening, Jogi.
Good evening. Go ahead. Quickly. Give it to me in 15 seconds.
The question Babaki asked him, he contradicted himself. He asked him, did Hamas start the war? He was contradicting himself from left to right, from right to left.
I need a question.
So my question is, why the people who caused the war now are shouting the victim? That is the question I want to ask him.
Okay, thank you. Hello?
Yeah, Cecile, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I need a question. 15 seconds. Go.
Yeah, my question is, the president of Israel, their language, does it have a connection with the language of the original Bible? That is one. Secondly,
he's already answered that. He said there is no connection with Israel and the Bible.
Where did they come from? Which land? At least they should have a land. Which land did they come from? And if they would leave, where would they go? That is my question.
Okay. All right. Let me answer. Let me just try and fit in one more. Hello.
Hi, Stoge. My question quickly is, what is his stand on terrorism? I think he sounds like an extremist, and my perception, I don't think he should have been the right person to start this borderline show. So
okay.
What is his stand on terrorism?
Right. So I didn't take the name because I can see you're laughing because you can hear the questions, right? Somebody said that my last caller said you sound like a terrorist. The other person said you were contradicting yourself on Hamas. And I think somebody else said, where did Israel, if Israelis are not the Israelites, where did they come from? There was a question I had earlier as well, which I forgot to ask you. Mike, you are laughing. These are, borderline is about separating perception from truth, history and facts, however discomforting it is. And as you can tell, a lot of people find history quite discomforting. Palestinian flag that they even at sports events, people have been told to bring them down. Over to you. You have 3 minutes before we go. I wish I could keep you for an extra hour. Go ahead.
Invite me to Nigeria. We can go speaking tour together.
I think we need to.
And we can do the interview live in front of audiences. And I think it would be
powerful. Yeah.
I think it'd be a great idea. We should discuss it after the show.
Absolutely.
Accusation of me being a terrorist and all this nonsense. I'm not going to provide it's not worth answering. Somebody asked something about the Hebrew language. Well, the Zionists took the ancient Hebrew and modernized it and created a new language, which is
we have 3 minutes. I'm being told we have 3 minutes. Yeah, keep
modern
going.
Hebrew.
Yeah.
So, the Zionists, the Jews that accepted Zionism, went on this campaign and immigrated to Palestine, built settlements, kicked out Palestinians, established a state, an apartheid state, And that's where they came from. And now we have Israelis. Israelis is the new thing. Israelis are not an extension of the ancient Hebrews. Israelis are a new identity. It's never existed before, you know. And so you had Jewish people who lived in Palestine, and they were Palestinian Jews, just like there were Christians and then Armenians and others. But Israeliness and the language that they speak, the modern Hebrew, is a new invention. So now Palestine has two nations, not Jews and Arabs, Israelis and Palestinians. The Palestinians are the indigenous people who were there, and you know, many of them are refugees and hopefully will return soon. And Israelis who are these settler. It's like white South Africans. White Africans, where do they come from? They're not indigenous to Africa. These were settlers that came and colonized and established an apartheid regime. And you know, and that's why there are whites in South Africa.
Yeah,
Israelis are like the white South Africans. You know, they came from outside. They settled. They colonized. They established a regime, and when the regime fell, they reigned. And that's the equivalent.
Thank you so much, Miko. We've run out of time. Literally, we've run out of time. But look, you're my first guest on Borderlines. I'm grateful for you giving up the time. We booked you for an hour. You gave me 2 hours. I am most thank you. Thank you for educating us. Thank you for taking us through the story of your life. You know, the story, the history of Palestine and Israel, and sharing the truth, candid honesty with us. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
I will be in touch. Lagos, those of you who are saying, how do you get to listen? Go on our YouTube. This is on YouTube. You can go and listen. If he's contradicted himself, I think you must have not heard him properly. Go on our YouTube, Nigeria Info 99.3, and Facebook. You will find it there. That is the end of my first edition, the debut, maiden of Borderlines. The truth is not meant to be comfortable. The truth is not meant to be applauded. History is history, because if we don't learn from the past, how do we continue to go forward? You don't have to like what history is. You don't have to like what the truth is. But you can't argue with facts. If you don't like it, go Google it. She's your auntie. My name is Reti Bakare. I am out of here. Until next Friday, I will have another guest with me on Borderlines. And you can argue with him then. Thank you. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
Nigeria's biggest conversation.
President Muhammadu Buhari says the country cannot afford a fresh lockdown because Nigeria's economy is...
99.3 Nigeria Info. We are more than just radio. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Nigeria Info FM. Check us out on Facebook at Nigeria Info 99.3. Follow us on Twitter at Nigeria Info FM and on Instagram at Nigeria Info FM Lagos for live updates as it